toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the spirit of guidance.
Dem einen entgegen, der Vollkommenheit, der Liebe, der Harmonie und der Schönheit, dem einzig Seienden, vereint mit all den erleuchteten Seelen, die den Meister, die Botschaft, den Geist der Führung verkörpern. Amen.
Thank you, Alima. Welcome, friends, Sirajas, cherags, and cherags in training. We're so happy to be with you again. This is part of our ongoing quarterly Zoom meetings to help our Chirag community feel connected, supported, and for members of our Siraj circle to be able to interact with you and share resources and help weave more community. So welcome. We're happy that you're with us today. Our topic today is death and dying in the work of the Chirag that shows up in so many ways, and we're looking forward to hearing the experience and teachings from the wisdom body of the Siraj circle and also smaller breakout groups so we can hear from each of you and all of your depth of experience. So we'll start today with our friend Alima in Germany, and then we'll go to our friend ZubinNur in Holland. So welcome, Alima.
Is it 15 minutes about, Sarah? Is that it? Okay. Would you give me a sign somehow? Try my best. So let us just for a moment just be with our breath, with our in-breath and out-breath, and just to really settle in this moment. And opening to just be with whatever arises in this moment and in the moments to come while we are together on this call. Letting go of expectations, ideas, and just being with. This is one of the main things I want to share today, is this attunement of just being with. No expectation, no way, this is the way it should be, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. And possibly not even knowing what comes up. And this is my situation in the moment, as I just arrived at a place before this call. I didn't even know if I could be here, and I didn't even prepare as I planned to, because life was leading other pathways. And in this, it just fits very well to the theme of death and dying, because I guess my preparation is a whole lifetime. And now just being in this moment and looking what comes up in this moment. This is how I think, or how I find that situations around death and dying are many times. We might prepare, we might have ideas, we might have expectations, and the reality might be very different than what we would wish for and what we would hope for, or what we would fear. And so for all of us, as all of us are dying, preparation or dealing with death and dying is a good thing for everybody on this earth. It's not an easy thing, but it's a good thing to do. But for the chirag, it's like a necessity, I would say, to being able to hold the space for the cycles of life, and for this very important cycle of life, station of life, which is the last one, the death and dying. Not everybody might have a deep call to do this, as there is many other things to do on the cherags path. So what comes up for me now is this call to service, and to listen to this call to service. For some of us, it might be a very deep call to be at this threshold of life with death and dying. For others, it might not. So I guess each one should listen. What am I called to? And I just, in this little time that I have, I would like just to share a little bit of my path, very personally, my call that I felt to be in this field, I would say for a lifetime now. And the call started actually by growing up in the house of my grandfather for a couple of years, who was in charge of the local graveyard. This means digging the graves, doing the funerals. So besides foresting and agriculture, being on the graveyard was one main part that I very naturally grew up with. And just later on in my life, looking back, I could see this is when the call started already to somehow deal with death and dying. And I decided when I was a young person to study biology, because for me life was calling me. But it was always life that had death in its mind. This is the same in biology, because everything that comes to this earth and lives also dies. So this end of life was always somehow there. But life itself is a fascinating thing, a thing I think we should use and experience until the end. Even if we deal with death and dying, for me, it's about life and about including death and dying into our life, and include those who are dying and all the rituals right into the warmth that life has, not put it aside, not make it a cold thing, but to embrace it so it can have its part in our life. So for me, somehow, when this call to do funeral services came up many, many years ago. And when I was younger and I was at the graveyard a lot, I was visiting funerals a lot. And in this moment when, that the priest had finished his speech and we started to walk toward the grave with the coffin, he said always some words that this path that we go now would be a short one, but we will rest for eternity. This is always the words he said. And for me, this was every time so shocking and so deeply sad, because it was this moment, oh, everything is over now. And I could not get used to this moment, starting crying, being shocked, and walking this path many times. So when I had this call for funerals, I thought I have to practice this, that I won't cry on this path, that I won't be shocked when this happens. And this is when I felt I never got used to this. And when I take part in a funeral, but then I learned that when I do the ritual, when I'm in the space of holding the sacred space, it doesn't touch me in that way. There is another state of that my practices come in, my Sufi path and everything, which is holding a ritual space, but knowing how people might feel who are participating and who have to bring a loved one to the grave, how deeply sad this thing is to do. And to know at the same time, let's say, the depth of the grave and the deep grief it brings. And as the cherags, at the same time, to be able the grief, but to be in touch with eternity, I would say, and keep the safe space. Maybe this is my main message for today, and to be with whatever is, but to really keep attuned to holding a safe, sacred space. because everybody else who joins a funeral they have all rights to feel and to do whatever is happening there. And I was amazed the first times how natural it felt for me to hold this bigger space and not to let myself be touched in this moment with fear, with sadness. Maybe later or before, when reflecting the whole thing, but to keep a sacred space and to keep on learning and growing in holding a sacred space. And I think we have many, many tools that help us to stay connected to this bigger reality. And also to prepare a space where people of all kinds of beliefs can join in, all kinds of inner developments can join in, and feel welcome. For me, when I do funeral services, it's important not to do something special that nobody in the community can deal with, even how fancy it might be or how spiritual it might be. To feel some connection to a greater reality that everybody somehow can join in, that is not a certain name or a certain thing, but somehow opening a bigger space that everybody would feel a sacred space. Naming it very different, I try to speak the language of the people who are present so they could understand what I'm talking about. And more important, they can feel a sacred atmosphere and an honoring. So this was is still my path of learning. I'm doing this for more than 20 years now. And I'm also doing this work in the emergency ministry. This means when people have died very suddenly in an accident or suicide or whatever. In Germany, we have a system of emergency ministry that we go out with the rescue forces, and it's a lot of being present, just being present, not doing something special, really being present for what is happening. And often a ritual is needed at that place because sometimes the body is taken away by police or whatever, to do something that people can have a short farewell. And it might be short in time, it might be only a few minutes that they give you, but it feels like eternity. So I have learned in this to be very brief sometimes, but to immediately somehow open space for something sacred. And people do feel this wherever we are and however the situation is. So this is my preparation also for my own thing, to just be with, to attune, and to trust that the sacred space is opening and to learn to hold it. Well, there is so much to say, so much to share, but I think the main thing is listen for this call to service. And is it yours to really deal a lot with the end of life, with this threshold? For some people in our circles, it's really their life path. For others, it might be something else, which is totally fine. Listen to that call and learning and getting as much experience as possible and learning to be with, but also to rise above in the moment in order to serve. So this is what is coming to my mind now, and I think my time might be over with this. And thank you for coming into this call. Thank you for walking this path. I think the world needs so much people who can be present with the threshold of life and to attune and to give others safe spaces in this. So I'm deeply grateful for everybody who joins into this path. And transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Alima, for your lifetime of dedicated service and your compassionate presence and encouragements to all of us. Such beautiful sharing and very important work. So let's go to ZubinNur.
Yeah, hiyo. Thank you, Alima. I didn't know that we have this childhood experience in common, as well as our current ongoing work with death and dying. I grew up with my grandparents, and our garden ended in the cemetery. And so the cemetery was like an extension of my playground. I couldn't go straight into it, but I'd go round and I'd just play there. And like you, looking to prepare for this today, it was kind of, my goodness, I was doing it then and I'm doing it now. And it just wasn't and isn't strange to be doing it, to be dancing with death. To me, has only brought more joy into living and life. And therefore, I find it a great thing to encourage people to do. I've been the one to be death doula for my family, for my mother and father and aunties and uncles. None of my family wanted to talk about death. Really, we weren't going to do that. Okay. I keep trying, especially trying to find out things like, what are your end of life wishes? No, we're not going to talk about it. Okay. Then doing the best we can with not knowing what a person wants. And now I work as a death doula with a voluntary organization here in Arnhem in the Netherlands, where I live. And I'm just given a name and address, often not even an age of the person, and told to go there between certain hours to sit with somebody who's dying. And on the way there, all the possibilities are like streaming through me. And the ultimate thing is, it doesn't matter who it is, or who they are, or where they are. What matters is, can I be there? It's just like Alima was saying, you know, am I prepared to forget my agenda, my preferences, and just be present for that person? And part of my training for that was to always be following them. And my work has led me to find out many of the people that I've guided are just so pleased to have a visitor, so pleased to have something from outside coming in. They don't want to always talk about where they are and what's happening and are they going to die tomorrow or next week, because basically none of us know anyway. But they want that breath of fresh air, and that's been interesting to kind of, even the organization that I work for would encourage me not to talk about life or me or whatever. And my thing is to, like Alima, to be there and to listen. What do they want? What helps them in this moment? And if that is giving them news of my cycle ride to get there or whatever, to be willing to share that and to be in contact with what am I willing to share, and to be willing with them, like with my family. I do try to open the closed boxes, like, have you made a will? Do you have an advocate in place? Do you have a no resuscitation thing in place? some people, even on their deathbed, don't want to talk about it. Sometimes their families also don't want them to talk about it. Some are relieved to have somebody who is willing to talk about it. Some aren't. That there is no rule of don't do this or do that, because when you're present, then you just hear and feel what to do in that moment with that person. And it's just sitting there and breathing with them. And some of them will have trouble breathing and being able to stay with your own breath and in contact with the other person. Their breathing can be very labored. And the mirror of how precious that breath is, how fortunate I am, we are, to be able to breathe freely. Maybe they're already on a breathing machine. Wow, the contrast and the ability to be there and to hold the situation. And also sometimes there's a place for this curiosity about death, and like, well, what do you believe? There's a dance there as well of, you know, like, how much do we share and how much do I ask? Well, what do you believe? What do you want to believe? What do you want? I've worked with a young woman who was very afraid, very, very afraid of dying. And really did not want there to be reincarnation. And I really do believe in reincarnation. So it was like putting me on the back burner, because that's just going to be a trigger for her. She's on this cusp of death. And on the one hand, she really wants to die. She's really suffering. And on the other hand, she's so afraid of not having control, of dying, and then going to somewhere where she's going to have to come back again. You know, like, whatever it is, it's going to be okay. That I was where I ended up with her. Wherever you go, whatever happens, it's going to be okay. You can choose. And I do believe the soul can choose. So that was like me finding a middle path for her that she could be comfortable with, of, you know, how am I going to let go? She ended up having palliative sedation, which is normally sort of, often people are gone within a couple of days. It took her nearly 2 weeks to let go. So again, it doesn't matter what the doctors say or what the expectations are. We are just one huge bundle of differences that somewhere also have some core that is so completely the same and so completely connected. And maybe that's the insight and the strength that carries me in this work of holding people, accompanying people, doing my best to comfort people so that they can release into death. And then usually, strangely enough, not being there at the moment when they actually go. So it is what it is, and it's letting go of our expectations. I've got a poem from Thich Nhat Hanh, which I think quite embodies some of our or my insights. I've recognized some of my Sufi path in it. Thich Nhat Hanh says, "The moment I die, I will try to come back to you as quickly as possible, the Bodhisattva. I promise it will not take long. Isn't it true I am already with you as I die each moment? I come back to you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry. And know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both, your tears and mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends history. Spring and winter are both present in the moment. The young leaf and the old leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry blossom in winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you. The poem also reminds me of the story of Morshid Sam going to Kew Gardens to see the roses, and it was winter, and the gardeners all upset, you know, it's winter, you can't see them. And Morshid Sam stands there and says, you mean you think I can't see the roses? There is, for me, this connection that is bigger than the rational and that which can be seen or experienced with the normal senses. And the more we work with this threshold, maybe the more contact we have or the more experience we have with this. I think my time's nearly up now as well. One thing I did want to mention is that I also initiated a death cafe in town. Death Cafe was something that a movement that started in England, and it was an initiative where people would literally in a cafe come together to talk about death, because there is a lot of aversion to talking about this transitoriness of life, and that there is a time when we won't be here. Wow, what a relief, or a joy, or a fear. And so I went to a safe place that I know in town and asked, could we do it there? In England, it started as something local that like kind of rises up and then blooms for a couple of months, maybe 6 months, and then it dies back down again and is quiet till somebody reinitiates. Here in town, we've been going now for 3 years. In January, we start our 4th year. And I think that's mainly because there are 3 of us who turn up and plan the meetings, even though many of them are open. We have our own discussions about death and what's touching us to do with death, who's dying in our community or family. And it is for many people a safe place to come with their grief. We're not grief counseling, but it's a place where death can be on the table. So that's another way that I feel we can serve in our ministry without actually being somebody who officiates at a ritual. Our ministry actually carries us into our communities if we want to, if that's our calling, to offer there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. And thank you for doing this work.
Thank you, ZubinNur. I put the poem that you just shared in the chat window, and when we send out the recording link from this meeting, I can include it in there as well. So we're going to go into our breakout rooms now. We'll go into 3 different rooms. There will be just a few.
Sára,
Yeah.
Sára, I have to leave before.
That's okay.
So I'm saying goodbye now. Thank everybody who is watching this.
So happy you could be with us.
Thank you, everybody, and God bless you.
Okay, friends. So I'm putting 3 conversation prompts in the chat window for you that I think will still be accessible to you when we're in our breakout rooms. So the first one is, In what ways has death and dying been part of your work in the world? In what ways has death and dying been part of your work in the world? Second is, what practices and wisdom teachings support you in this work? What practices and wisdom teachings support you in this work? Or, because I'm not assuming that y'all are comfy with this subject, in what ways are you moving toward overcoming discomforts you might carry about issues of death and dying? In what ways are you moving toward overcoming discomforts you might carry about issues of death and dying? Okay, so those are your 3 prompts, and we'll be back together in about a half hour, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again momentarily. Hold on just a moment while I get this happening.
Good morning. What I prepared today was a couple of readings. And the first one from the Bowl of Sake and commentary of August 28th. Death is a tax the soul has to pay for having had a name and form. The words of Hazrat Inayat Khan. In the commentary of Murshid Sam, as follows. Soul does not die, form dies. Soul does not die, name dies. Life is a journey from eon to eon, and yet is not a journey. Circumstances change, essences never. We don and doff cloaks, which we call bodies, which are not ourselves. Such is the nature of creation. And from the Sufi Message of Hazrat Inayat Khan volumes, I marked a couple of things here. This is in the volume called The Phenomenon of the Soul. In the Quran, it is written, quote, "It is he who multiplied you on the earth, and to him shall you be gathered," unquote. This denies a return to earth. Mention is made, however, of another life in that surah. Quote, "Every soul must taste of death, and ye shall only be paid your reward in full on the resurrection day," unquote. Here, the resurrection is spoken of, the making alive of the souls without the physical body. And it is plainly said that this existence will be as clear and distinct as is our life on earth. I find that particular passage to be worthy of contemplation, a lifetime of contemplation. So those are little bits from the teachings. And the only other thing I have today is Moinadeen's paper on grief. Now, I sent it recently to all of the Sirajas. These are his words. And if anybody wants it sent, if they don't have it, my email is najat2@cox.net. I'll email it to anybody who asks. Moinadeen's words. You swore you would never let your heart be broken again. Once or even twice was enough, but a third time never. Or perhaps this is your first time getting to know Humpty Dumpty after the great fall. At any rate, here you are, brought to your knees by having lost what you loved most in life. The grieving process is an eclipse of the conscious mind by the emotional mind in reaction to a great personal loss. Painfully characteristic of this eclipse is the loss of control normally experienced by the conscious mind. Inner chaos suddenly displaces years of hard-won, but ultimately fragile self-possession. One feels crazy, alien, exiled from life. The unclaimed and shattered feelings encountered in the abyss of grief can disembowel one's identity so completely that hell becomes a living reality. It is important to reassure persons in grief that what they are going through is indeed a healing process and a natural response to the holocaust of loss. In no particular order, one is numbed by denial, obsessed by anger and rage. In the bargaining phase, one sells one's soul in exchange for personal survival. One's depression ranges from neurotic to psychotic. When one has traversed these stages with blood, sweat, and tears, the challenge of acceptance calls one to cross the threshold of pain into a new life. Short of acceptance, a crisis of personal identity is potentially dangerous, because one has suffered ruin at the level of one's most basic feelings. And remember, feelings are always held sacred. The primal survival instincts can go haywire. One may feel like killing oneself or someone else in answer to one's loss. Help should be sought from a competent source. It is imperative to show the grieving person that these raw and inflamed feelings need acceptance and honor. Rejection aborts the embryo of sanity seeking to be born. Acceptance heralds the new birth, betokens healing of the broken heart. Take a giant step toward wholeness. Be at one with your pain. There is a tendency to want to return of things before the fall. And at that point, my page runs out and I'm missing the last couple of lines here. I don't know where the second page went. Here it is. But counterfeit innocence can never stand up to authentic experience. There is no way out but through. New life will only come when one finds the courage to step into the unknown. The unknown often involves embracing that which has been regarded as unacceptable, such as a nice person with repressed feelings having to become a real person with real feelings. All these challenges brought forth by the grieving process are variations of the one inescapable theme. Will you choose life or death? Pain of loss brings us all to our knees sooner or later. The passion play of personal crisis serves to create the human being anew, to move the soul a step closer to its spiritual purpose. Thus it has been, thus it will be. Let us start from our knees for a change and pray that we become instruments of the divine compassion. And he quotes at the end from Hazrat Inayat Khan, "Beloved, thou diggest into my heart deeper than the depths of the earth. Thou changest my flesh into fertile soil. Thou turnest my blood into streams of water. Thou needest my clay, I know, to make a new universe." Amen. I'm muting.
Thank you, Najat. Excellent, beautiful attunement to the teachers and wisdom body in our lineage stream. Thank you so much. Okay, friends, we have about 15 minutes left, and I have about 3 hours of material to share with you. Are you ready? I'm just going to talk really fast. Okay, so here are the main things that I feel are critically important in our cheragging work around death and dying. First is developing our own equanimity, stability, peace, understanding, familiarity, and comfort with death and dying. All those things. That's all. Second is developing our spacious attention, compassion, generosity, strength, and the ability to support the wide spectrum of other people's experiences. Third, our ability to be an agent of blessing and peace at the bedside of the dying and while officiating services for our communities. Fourth is developing the capacity for compassionate and skillful conversation with loved ones, with the bereaved, and with people who are doing end-of-life planning and dying processes. Next is actually officiating services for death and dying. That is not just memorial and funeral services, but also there are services, celebrations of life while people are still in the body. There are blessings and prayers for the actual process of dying that are last rites in different traditions. Usually we use that phrase in a Christian context, but there are last rites in all the different faith traditions. Then there's real world training that is about doing hospice volunteer work, having conversations in our communities, among our family, friends, loved ones, anyone who needs our help, guidance, and hand-holding facilitation in doing end-of-life conversations. Then there is our spiritual life, that is tending to our practices, our beliefs, discovering what dies and what does not die. To those ends, as a cherags, yes, I can send you that brilliant list. I have so many things to send you, Jelani. So in my work as a cherags, I am training cherags, people who are going to be ordained as ministers, and I have 3 units of study that are around issues of death and dying, 3 of them. One of them is about dealing with our own perspectives, experience, assumptions, beliefs, our constructs and patterns around death and dying that are largely unexamined until we choose to examine them, or until they smack us in the face and we have no choice but to examine them. So just dealing with our basic fundamental experiences and beliefs around death and dying. Second unit is around issues of suicide. Very specifically and explicitly, the work of a cherag who is tending to aspects of death, we need to be prepared to deal with the unique circumstances, energies, and intensities that show up around suicide. And it's not just about officiating memorial and funeral services, it's also having conversations with all of the families and loved ones and dealing with the repercussions and fallout from suicide. And then the third one is about dealing with the logistics of planning and officiating memorial and funeral services. So 3 units of preparation. That's huge. Here's a very short passage from Piro Murshid Hazrat Inayat Khan. It's in the message, the addresses to cherags. When someone asked him, must cherags go to pray to the ill and dying if they are called? Like someone is trying to get out of this. I want to be a cherag, but I don't want to deal with death and dying. And Murshid's response is, yes, to refuse anyone is to refuse God. To refuse anyone is to refuse God. If someone calls us and says, someone is dying, someone is afraid of dying, someone has died, can you come help? We do not have the opportunity to say, nope, sorry, I don't do that. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm afraid of that. I don't deal with death. Nope, sorry. Nope, to refuse anyone is to refuse God. Okay, so In my preparations with cherags in training, I have for each of those units that I talked about, I give lots of specific logistical conversations, assignments, things to read, things to think about, things to pray about, and they're assigned practices that I give for each month that help us develop a more comfortable relationship with aspects of death. One of them is the Amal practice. Are all of you familiar with the Amal practice? I see some nods, I see some raised eyebrows. So I'll give you a very brief version. I'm not going to lead it, but the Amal practice is really maybe the most powerful process that we can put ourselves through in our living experience to help us let go of and realize what dies and what does not die. So this is the process in brief where you lie down on the floor with arms outstretched and legs spread apart, and you imagine first that you take off your legs and send them to the far corners of the room. Then you take off your arms and you send them to the upper corners of the room. Then you take off your head and you send it to the the bottom of the wall, but of the wall that is in front of your head. Then you take off your torso, like the whole rest of your body, and send it to the lower wall. Then you take all of your thoughts, all of your mental constructs, and you send them off to the right side. You take all of your feelings, all of your emotions and associations, send them off to the left side. So there is nothing left but your pure, vast emptiness. Pure, vast emptiness. And once you're in that, you rest in that infinite spaciousness, which is our eternal nature, beyond the body, beyond the thoughts, beyond the feelings, beyond these identifications. And into that, we recite these phrases, these wazifa concentrations, starting with Allah. That's not really something that's said, but that's the first attunement. Always start with God, the all-pervading reality. Then Subuhun. That is the aspect of purification and glory that is the resplendent and the sublime. So first Allah, Subuhun. Then Qudusun, the holy, that pure aspect of our beings, of all beings. Qudusun. Hayyun, that is the life itself, the eternal, all-pervading life itself. Then Qayyumun, that is the everlasting. It is what returns when everything else has fallen away, the all-pervading livingness. Qa'imun is the self-existent. Qa'imun, it's a little bit different from Qayyumun, but very similar roots. So this one is the self-existent or the independent that is released from any of the attachments. Da'imun is the enduring or the constant. It is the consistent aspect of God. And then finally, Abadan Abad, that is about the endless, the eternal, what always has been before the beginning and continues after the end. Okay, so Amal, excellent, powerful practice. Please get the encouragement and blessing from your guide before engaging in that process. It is intense and beautiful and powerful and important, and get your permission from your guide. All right. There are also a set of the 7 weeks of practices of wazifa concentrations after someone has died. These have become quite prevalent in our Ruhaniyat family practices, and they started with Reb Zalman, who was an honorary sheikh in our lineage stream, one of the founders of the Inayati Maimuni order and founder of the oh gosh, my brain just stopped. I'm sorry. Jewish Renewal. Thank you. Jewish Renewal. My brain kicked back in. So Reb Zalman gave Shabda these 7 practices, concentrations that go for one for each week after someone has died in the Jewish tradition, and then translated them into the Arabic wazifa form for us. So these 7 beautiful names of God are concentrated on one per week after someone has died. That's the 49 days, which is also connected to the Buddhist perspective about the bardos. So the first week is Ya Rahim. You know what these are, so I'm not even going to explain them. Ya Rahim. Second is Allahu Akbar. Third is Ya Rahman. Fourth is Ya Mansur. Fifth is Ya Jamil. Sixth is Ya Wadud. And 7th is Ya Malik. I'm happy to send those to you again, but I'm sure you all have them already. So those 7 concentrations are an excellent process of attuning to what is unfolding in the journey of the soul and how can we offer the appropriate blessings for the spirit that is traveling into the arms of the beloved. Okay, another set of daily practices that I recommend for cherags in training are the triplet, the 3 wazifas that, or wazaif, that go together, that are Ya Muhyi, Ya Mumit, Ya Hai. Ya Muhyi is the life, the God, the aspect of God that gives life in specific forms. Ya Mumit, that is the giver of death. One of the beautiful names of God is the aspect of death itself. I love that. Then Yahai, that is the eternal, all-pervading, eternal aspect of life. And it is Hai that allows Muhyi and Mumit to exist. So all those 3 together. Then, I'm almost done rambling at you because we're almost out of time. Then there's a qasab practice that is one of the specifically controlling the aspects of our breath in order to invite certain experiences and energetic awareness. So in short, qasab practices are where you shape the breath according to your will. And fikr practice, different, is when you attune your intention with the breath in its natural form. So these are very different things. For qasab, I like to give this triangle breath. There are 2 different aspects of a triangle breath. One of them is a triangle that is shaped like this, where you breathe in, you hold the breath, and then you breathe out. Breathe in, hold the breath, breathe out. The other is the one that goes like this, where you breathe in, breathe out, and then hold the breath on the exhalation. Breathe in, breathe out, hold the breath at the base of the exhalation. And that one is the one that I recommend for attunement to and getting more comfortable with these aspects of death and dying, where we breathe in, we breathe out, and then we hang out in the out-breath, in the emptiness, in the aspect of death itself. Then we breathe in, breathe out, hang out in the emptiness. And this is specifically a counted breath where you breathe in perhaps for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold the exhalation for 4 counts. In 4, out 4, hold 4. So that one I recommend if you're comfortable and safe doing it. And don't give yourself an anxiety attack. Okay, any of the shuggle practices are good attunements for death and dying. Any of the shuggle practices where you close off some aspects of your sensory experience and rest in the silence. You rest in the stillness, which is the nature of our being when we're not distracted and pulled into all of the stimuli of life. So you can do the simple shuggle practices where you only, for example, one of them is when you close your ears. You breathe in, close your ears, hold the breath for just a couple seconds, and then open your ears and breathe out. That's one of them. There's one where you breathe in, close your eyes, breathe out. Breathe in, close your eyes, hold your breath, and then breathe out. There's one where you close your mouth, close your nostrils. Each of these aspects that are closing off your senses and remembering that you are not your senses. You are not the ways that you engage in the outer world. You are the silence and the stillness that underlies all of these worldly experiences. There's also the full-on shuggle where you close down all the senses at the same time, direct your eyes to a single pointed focus, put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. That is really closing down everything and going in. Again, don't give yourself an anxiety attack. Get the permission of your guide before doing these practices. They're intense and important. Okay, I thought we were going to sing, but we're not. There were too many words. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to Alima for being with us for the first hour and sharing your deep wisdom and lifelong experience and devotion. Thank you, ZubinNur, for sharing your also. I didn't realize that you guys had such a shared parallel beginning and expression of work and service in the world. And thank you for facilitating your ongoing, not your, but the ongoing death cafes and opening the conversations and getting out of the taboos. Thank you, Najat, for bringing us into all of the attunement to the wisdom teachings of our lineage stream and the Blessed Masters that are supporting and guiding us all along the way. Thank you, beautiful friends, for your participation in the conversation. Please send me the resources that you'd like to share with each other, and I will send them out along with the recording.
Thank you, Sára, for bringing us together.
My great
Thank you for all the work you do.
Yeah, thanks for the mastery of guidance.